Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the This Ain't Luck podcast. Today we're here. We have Paul Moore with us, and he is the senior manager at BBC Commercial Rights and Business Affairs. Big deal, guys. We got Paul Moore in the house. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for coming and visiting with us. You know Steve. You haven't met Joel. He's our COO. And we've been waiting to talk to you for a while. We've been, when's Paul coming? Joel and I are like, did you get Paul yet? And we waited through the holidays, and now we've got Paul here. And I think everybody's going to learn a little bit about music and music licensing and how it works at the BBC. I'm not sure, but I think BBC is the biggest broadcaster in the whole world, right? It is. Right?
I don't know if it's the biggest broadcaster in the world, but it certainly has an important place in the world. I'm sitting here in New Broadcasting House in central London. 7 floors below me in this building is the central BBC newsroom, which is just about to go out on what we call the 6 o'clock news. But was also broadcasting on our global news channels as well, and it's available of course in the US. And on various floors around me are radio studios that are broadcasting literally around the world via the BBC World Service. So we've got quite a reach.
These studios are legendary, the things that have gone on in some of these studios, right? I mean, absolutely legendary, like shows and performers and live jams and all kinds of neat stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Until very recently, we worked in a building just around the corner, which housed some of our national radio stations. And there's some legendary sessions being recorded there, as well as in Maida Vale, which is another studio, now actually owned by Hans Zimmer, up in northwest London. But yeah, there's a lot of very important content that's being recorded in this building and other buildings around the BBC estate, both here and internationally.
When did it start? It's over 100 years old, isn't it?
It's 102 or 103 years old. We celebrate our centenary, I think 2 years ago, so we're 102 years old, yeah.
That's just incredible. I mean, everybody has to understand when the BBC started 100 years ago, 1920, what, 1925? No, it would be 1923 or something like that.
I mean, something like that. I'll get told off for not remembering the exact year.
Right,
yeah.
And that's between World War I and World War II. That's how long ago it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
There's a beautiful room in this building, which is called the Council Chamber, which is in the old part of the building. So I'm not far from in where I am now, which has photographs of all of the Director Generals from the BBC across the ages, including Lord Reith, who is the founding Director General. We don't call them CEOs, we call them Director Generals. Very sadly, our current Director General recently resigned for around something we're not going to talk about today. So we're waiting for a new Director General, but Tim, our existing DG, will have his portrait up there, and justifiably so in the not too distant future when he leaves us.
Is that a big gossip around the building of who's going to get it, or do you guys already know?
Absolutely no idea whatsoever. It's an interesting. There's a regulatory point around how someone is actually appointed, and it's quite complex. And I'm not going to go there.
Okay,
we'll probably be the last to know.
I'm Chris Muggs, songwriter, producer, sometimes artist. I first heard about Artist Portal Studio a few years back when I was working with a collaborator. We finished our track, submitted it to Artist Portal Studio, and eventually got added to their catalog. Since then, our music's been used in a whole bunch of TV shows on network and cable television. I've been working with Artist Portal Studio ever since. My music's been used in pro and college sports games. As an independent artist, it's tough getting your music out there when you're competing against major labels. For me, Artist Portal Studio has been an advantage. It gets your music in front of all types of tastemakers, decision makers, and music supervisors. No matter where you are on your music journey, Artist Portal Studio is going to help you. Whether you do hip hop, pop, polka, dance, doesn't matter. They find ways to get your music in front of all types of audiences.
Let's get into your history, Paul. Let's get in the Wayback Machine and talk about very, very young Paul Moore, and how he gets into music, and how you get to where you are now, the journey through that.
Yeah, sure. It's quite a long journey to get to the BBC, and it's a little bit convoluted, but I'll give you a kind of shortened version of it. I was as a kid totally obsessed by music. My mum listened to the radio every day when I was a kid. I was pretty obsessed by pop music, the Beatles. And I was born long enough ago to be around the same time as the Beatles.
I was going to ask that. Was it a Beatles on Ed Sullivan moment? But I don't know for a Brit if that would be like the same thing as an American growing up in the early '60s. I guess
at the point I was born. I mean, I was born in 1963, which the year the Beatles sort of broke.
We are all exactly the same age. We were all born, but we're all 63, 64. Isn't that wild? So cool.
Well, I'm 65, but I don't want to say I'm.
You're not 65, you jerk.
1965.
I thought you said you're 65. Okay, but we're all really close. I mean, very, very close.
I mean, my name is Paul, and Paul was the most popular name in the UK in 1963. This is the first moment that I was decidedly uncool because I was given a saint's name. It had nothing to do with Paul McCartney. I mean, the Beatles were always there. They were in the background, and there was no Ed Sullivan moment. They were just around. They were the band of them and the Stones and others. And at that age, I wouldn't have necessarily known who those bands were, but I knew the music because I heard it every day coming through, actually, BBC Radio 1, which is the pop music station, which is still broadcasting 2 floors up from me here right now, in actual fact. So music was always in my life, but so was the media generally. My father was a journalist. He was a print journalist, and so I was kind of brought up around music and print and politics and just what we now call the media. And so I think I always kind of felt that I was going to find a place there at some point, but I had absolutely no idea what that was going to be. I guess I probably, like most people around that age, I'm massively influenced by punk, but was too young to really be a proper punk rocker. But punk had a massive musical influence on me. I tried to be in bands. I am, frankly, an awful musician. I can't sing. I play guitar very, very badly indeed.
Yeah, but punk, you didn't have to be good. If you remember the Sex Pistols, they didn't know anything, man.
Well, exactly. But that shows how bad I actually was. It was like, no, you're not doing this. You're not doing this, man. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, that was always part of it. And I guess when I wasn't very academic, to be honest with you. I left school and I had to get a day job. So I was also sort of doing a bit of DJing and just hanging out at gigs and with all these the cool kids. I was born and brought up in Cardiff in South Wales, which I lived until I was in about 25. And I had to get a day job. And my day job, actually, it's nothing to do with musical media, but I went to work for the Inland Revenue, it's then called, which is what you call the IRS in the US. And my day job was working as a sort of tax guy, working effectively for the government. And there is a reason to tell you this, because it actually does lead to me being in the music industry. So I moved to London in 1989 with my then girlfriend, still current wife. I always call her current wife because she keeps me on my toes.
I'm pretty sure after all this time, it's not going to be changing. Usually,
keep your options open. No.
Well, no, it's her keeping her options open, I think.
Really?
But I realised that working for the Inland Revenue wasn't going to make me a fortune, and I wasn't going to be able to live the lifestyle I really wanted to live in London. And so I discovered that there were these accounting firms who specialised in music and media. And I thought, well, I'll go and work for one of those firms. And one of the first interviews I went to, I met this amazing guy called David, who was a senior partner of a very small, very niche firm in West London. And he offered me a job. And for the first sort of 3-6 months, I guess, I was a tax manager doing fairly mundane stuff. But I think he recognized me as someone who was quite passionate about music. I was at gigs most nights of the week. I was at clubs at the weekend. And I was already connected. I had a lot of friends in the music industry. And I think he recognized in me someone who could help grow that business and work with artists. So we set up probably one of the first sort of American-style business management firms in the UK. And we worked with some amazing people over the years that we were working together. I worked, for example, very closely with Placido Domingo's team. We represented Michael Tilson Thomas, who was then the principal guest conductor of the LSO, and great friend of the late Leonard Bernstein. With very famous ballerinas, we big international artists who would come to the UK to tour, and we did all their tour accounting work and tax clearances, like the Chili Peppers. We were with In Excess. We worked with Johnny Cash. We worked with loads of really big acts. So I kind of really got under the hood.
So
And
just to be
really
clear,
began
so
to-
everybody understands that you guys would manage the business when they arrive in the UK. Chili
Yeah, that's
Peppers
right.
come on tour, money's coming in, money's going out, all has to be managed, dealt with, and you guys were running the whole shebang.
Exactly. Generally for the European activities. So
Mhm.
we were pretty busy. And it was great. I learned an awful lot. And towards the end of my time doing that, I worked very closely with the late Malcolm McLaren, who has always been something of a hero to me. The
Me
great sort of
too.
man who managed the Sex Pistols, an absolute, old school situationist. And in many respects, and I've said this publicly many, many times, Malcolm was one of the most dreadful people to have to deal with in a business perspective I've
Why, was
ever
he
dealt with
nuts?
in my life. Well, I wouldn't say he was nuts, but he was just difficult because he was Malcolm. He would do things his own way. But at the same time, he was also massively inspirational. He had these amazing ideas. He was an absolute joy to work with. And you didn't always agree with what he wanted to do. My job as a business manager was sometimes to dissuade him to doing some of the
Now,
things that he wanted
Malcolm's
to do.
not just the Sex Pistols. There's more to
No.
Malcolm, isn't he? He's the Psychedelic Furs. Is he them too?
No, not the Psychedelic Furs, but Bow Wow Wow, for example.
Yes, Bow Wow Wow. Is he Sade?
No, he's not. But he's the guy who came up with the sort of whole Buffalo Gills thing, the sort of double Dutch tracks and things like that. He made a great album. It's actually the period when I worked with him. We made an album called Paris, which was an homage to Paris, where he was living at the time. I got to spend a bit of time with him there. I mean, he was an incredible artist, and unfortunately,
he was into fashion and hair. Was there like a hairdressing and fashion involved in there as well?
So
Or something?
his former partner had been Vivienne Westwood. They were together in the mid to late 70s to I guess the mid 80s. So they worked together for many years. They weren't working together when I was worked with Malcolm. I mean, in the end, I stopped working with Malcolm for reasons we won't go into here. You know, there comes a point when some relationships get so strained, it becomes like, right, you need to move on, do something. But I never stopped respecting him. In fact, I remained quite friendly with him. But he kind of inspired me to do something else because I just thought, well, actually, I'm learning all of these things about the music industry. I love music. I may not be a great musician, but I understand music. I do understand how it works, what music is about the joy it can bring, about the way it can move you. And I want to be closer to that. So I invested in a record label with my then senior partner. He'd already had an investment in it. And I ended up running that probably about 80% of my time. It was an independent label specializing mainly with a couple of reggae artists who we signed, both UK reggae artists, I will add. We also did some sort of partnership deals with other labels who were looking for distribution. Didn't have distribution deals, wanted to piggyback ours.
And this would all be located in London.
It was all in London. And so I ended up running this label full time for just over 2 years, and it was really tough because we really never really had quite enough money to do all the things we wanted to do. But somehow I think we kind of got away with it. And at a point when we were thinking, well, this is great, but where do we go now? We are kind of running out of money. We were nominated for an award. There's an award in the UK called the MOBOs, the Music of Black Origin, and it recognises principally sort of artists of influence or creating black music in the UK. And Peter Hunnigel, who was one of my artists, was nominated for Best International Reggae Act. And this was the first year of the MOBO Awards. It was a televised event. It was a big deal. And we won it. And all of a sudden, things sort of totally took off. And I made the instant great business decision to get the hell out because we got as far as we could. It needed someone else to take it on and move it to the next stage. So we sold up, and and I kind of moved on from there, not having a clue what I wanted to do next. I mean, I made some money, but not enough to retire. Let's put it that way. So I kind of drifted back into business management. I ended up working for a city firm who had opened a media office in London's West End. I worked with a partner in the firm to build a music division, which I worked there for 4 years. First couple of years quite happily. Second 2 years, realizing this really wasn't me. I was very much a square peg in a round hole. Wearing a suit every day was not my thing. I'd never had to do that in any job I'd ever had. And if it hadn't been for the fact one of my clients was Primal Scream, who were a great band and a band I admired hugely and I was very friendly with, I probably wouldn't have stayed as long as I did. But I had a job of work to do with them, and that was pretty much once we'd done that, I got the hell out again. 4 years. I'm not somebody who switched jobs, constantly. I've kind of made some.
4 years is a long time, especially with a suit.
Well, exactly. But at the same time, a very good friend of mine was going through a similar experience. I was also leaving a big firm, having been drawn in to do something very similar to what I'd been asked to do, which is sort of kind of build something really very music focused, lots of work around royalties, a lot around tour accounting, and he and I got together and said, well, let's open our own shop. So we did that, and it was the beginning of a couple of years of a great time because we were both sort of finding our feet. His real skill was running a royalty audit business, which I'd done, quite a bit of work around, and I had clients who I could bring in. We could, use those skills. But I'd also done a lot of tour accounting, and as it happens, one of Aid's main clients was Radiohead, and Radiohead at the time were looking for a new tour accountant. And being the brazen show-offs that Aid and I were, we go, we can do that. And next thing you know, we're off doing the Radiohead Hail to the Thief World Tour, which was quite a sort of a fun period of time.
Yeah, that's like a whirlwind.
It was. I did most of the American stuff. I spent quite a bit of time in LA, and so we sort of did that. Had some good times at that point. And then we kind of decided we wanted to do different things. He still remains one of my best friends, I'll say. We never fell out, but we decided we didn't want to work together anymore. That we both had different interests and we want to really focus in on them. And I still had a bit of a creative itch. So I'd been managing a band who'd been signed to a big UK independent label, a band called Snowblinds. Nobody would have heard about outside of the UK, who had done okay. I'd worked with a couple of great songwriters, and I focused a little bit more on that for several years, and it was great. That period in the 2000s was good, but there was one moment where I had to reflect, and that moment I'm sure you guys will remember in the sort of mid 2000s, in that kind of post Napster era. There was definitely a tightening of belts. We were about to hit a worldwide, financial crisis. People who had previously been saying to people like me, "I'll give you $10,000 to come and do this work for me, and it'll only take you like 2 weeks," and there's plenty of jobs like that coming through all the time. They started drying up, or people started bringing work back in-house. Certainly in the UK territory and in Europe was where I
had a recording studio at that time, and I remember that happening. What they were tightening up, man.
It was difficult, and I just thought, you know what, I've had a really good run. I can carry on doing what I'm doing, but I'd like to do something different. And it's at that point, to cut a long story short, I joined the BBC. I went to join BBC Worldwide, which was the name of BBC's commercial business at the time. And I was kind of almost like an internal consultant doing things about, telling people how to work with talent, how to communicate with talent, how to they were just making people more aware of how the industry works. I worked in a really big department that had a lot of very young people who'd be brought in to revamp kind of the royalty division, really. And I did that for a while, which is tremendous. And I wasn't planning to stay that long until one day my boss came to me and said, we have some issues we're looking at that are music related. Would you like to have a look at that with us? And I said, well, I'll have a look, but I don't work in music anymore. I work in television and distribution now, so I don't do music work.
So when you say you were in television, like all the top shows, you would be you were consulting on how they deal with the stars and licensing.
Not so much that, to be honest with you. It was more, no, actually. So BBC Worldwide was the division of the BBC that distributed content. So they were selling content globally. And our challenge was, how do we then, so you're paying royalties to music collecting societies, you're paying talent for the secondary exploitation of their content, and that was something that had grown massively over a couple of years for the BBC. It's a huge distribution business,
and a really big mess to deal with, sorting everything out, right?
Yes, and it grown very, very quickly. So like most businesses, you kind of get caught sorting that, and you end up playing catch up. I mean, BBC Studio Distribution, as it's now called, is the biggest distributor of TV content outside of the US. It's an enormous business, and we're talking like shows like global shows like Top Gear, which is all the formats of that. We've got things like Doctor Who, all the landmark natural history titles from David Attenborough. I mean, these are big selling shows. And
Clarkson's
what we were describing, not one of ours, that's Amazon, actually.
Oh, is it Amazon? Because that's right, he left. God, I love Jeremy.
Indeed. Oh, I love Clarkson's Farm. In fact, the music supervisor on that show used to work in the team I look after here in the BBC Public Service.
Really? Very cool.
But yes, so I was kind of doing that work, and then I was asked to look at some music things, and I ended up taking on that role and running music reporting for BBC Series Distribution, kind of working with other people across the business to revamp it, looking at technology solutions to make things easier. Again, making sure we manage relationships with the collecting societies who allowed us to sell programs under secondary licenses. A lot of relationship management, because my whole career has pretty much been based largely on talking to people and explaining how things work. That's what you do when you're a business manager. You make decisions, sure, but you also have to explain your decisions to people who very often aren't interested. They're interested in being creative. They're interested in, drawing a picture, or they're interested in filming something or making a piece of music. They're not interested.
And a lot of people that do the business part aren't very good at communicating with creative people. So to have both of those skills is a valuable skill. For sure.
Yes, absolutely. The best business managers are the people who communicate best and have a really good team of people who are really kind of anarchy and are very good at like crunching the numbers and making them easy to understand so you can go away and explain it. You can't do it without good teams. And, I'll come on to what I do now, in a moment, I think. The people I work with at BBC Studios Distribution was what it became by the time I left there to move to a different part of the BBC nearly 6 years ago. I had some amazing people across technology, across finance, who kind of worked to deliver the vision that we came up with collectively to make things work better. And very importantly, for an organisation like the BBC, which is a public service broadcaster, it's funded by our licence fee payers, and we support the licence fee via our commercial activities. So it's really important that you get things right, that you communicate properly to your talent, because that will impact the next talent negotiation when you hire an actor to appear in a drama. If they've not been paid properly on something they've done previously, then their agent
coming back.
Less likely. Yeah, no, exactly. It works both ways. So it's really, really important, and it's something that I'm pleased to say, we got very right. It's always been decent enough, but it could always have been better. And I think those relationships are very well managed now. Because I think everybody knows that's how important that actually is. But in doing that music piece, there were lots of things going on around secondary licensing. And I think we'll sort of come on to that later in our conversation when I talk about future-proofing TV content. I've got very deeply involved in those conversations about how do we use music in our content to make sure that it's future-proof, to make sure that everyone's getting paid and that everything works properly. So, which then kind of prompted me to move to where I am now in this part of the BBC.
Paul, you're mentioning secondary licensing. That's not everyone that's listening or watching this
Good
will
question,
know what
Steve.
that means.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm thinking about what is that? In my mind, I'm doing that kind of thing. So I'm sure that a lot of our artists are wondering too what that. Can you explain just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You're so used to in this world just using that sort of jargon all the time, and not
Yeah.
remembering that. And I've just been talking about communicating clearly, so it's very important.
Okay.
So it's a very good question. Secondary licensing is around. Let's explain it from a TV program. If you make a TV program, somebody will acquire the rights, and that would usually give them the right to make the content available on a platform. So, the purposes of my explanation, the BBC public service says, we like this program, we want to commission this program, we'll pay you some money, we'll make it. Either an independent producer will make it, or in the scenario I'm going to describe, BBC Studios, which is our commercial arm, and they produce some of our content, they'll make it. And what may happen is that we'll talk to BBC Studios Distribution and say, if you want to invest in this program, you can get the rights to distribute it. So it means that you put some money in, you get the distribution rights, you can then sell that program. That's secondary licensing. The primary license covers the broadcast of the program. The secondary is the ability to copy and supply it in music terms, sell it to other broadcasters. So for music purposes, that means that if the program is sold, then as it stands now, then you would get some mechanical royalties for the copy of the program because it contains your music, and then you'd get some performance royalties when an international broadcaster shows the show. So it's shown in America. If you're a PRS member, then ASCAP or BMI will collect that money for you and pass it through to you. So that's secondary
Got it.
licensing.
So it's
You know,
a good
very highly.
idea. A good idea for our artists to provide music for opportunities with the BBC. That seems like what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Commercial rights business affairs, what do they actually do? I mean, in music, you're in the music. Let's start there. That's because it's a big title.
Yeah.
So
Okay. There's a lot of words. So to explain it, it actually is commercial, rights, business affairs. So it talks about really the division I work in, and there are about 170 people in this division doing all sorts of different things. But we will do so. We look after our commercial activity, so dealing with our commercial deals, which includes kind of things like our blanket licenses, our arrangements with third parties. It's just about rights generally, not just music rights, but all rights. So, for example, the rights around talent, who are actors, who will generally be members of the Equity Union in the UK, equivalent of SAG in the US, with writers, with directors, and so on. And then just general business affairs work. I'm just going to talk about sort of my part of the business. So we sit within an area of the business that that's primarily looks after our framework agreements, so the agreements we have with the talent unions and the collecting societies, and our blanket arrangements, as I say, which is our covers off music. And my particular part, I work very closely and report to the head of music licensing, a lady called Nikki Pignall, who looks after those blanket licenses and negotiates them and deals with a lot of those sort of industry relationships. And what I do is I look after everything operational. So the way in which we actually operate under the music licenses, which sounds quite dull. And sometimes it's quite dull, but at other times it's terribly, terribly exciting and involves lots of really interesting things that really fascinate me. And I look after a team of about, I never get the number right, I think it's like 13 or 14 people who do various things. So I have, although I manage one team, I can divide them into two. So I look after the music rights team, and the music rights team are responsible for all of our music clearances, all of our music licensing, and all of our commissioning, the contracting of commissioning for new music for programs commissioned by the BBC Public Service. I can go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but I also look after the music reporting team, who are responsible for the onward reporting of every use of every piece of music used across all of our platforms to the collecting societies principally. So that's in the UK, that's the PRS and the MCPS,
When you
and of
say
course
commissioning,
PPL.
when you say commissioning, does that mean, oh, a show's getting ready to do a new theme or they need music for a new show? They'll go out and arrange, okay, what are they going to use? Who's going to write the theme? Who's going to score it? What libraries will they use? That's what commission does?
Yeah.
The
So
commission does?
commissioning, yeah. So commissioning. So there's two parts of the commissioning. We only look after programs that are commissioned by the BBC Public Service, which is where I work. BBC Studios also make programs for third parties, so they may be commissioned by Amazon, or they may be Nat Geo, or another UK broadcaster. We only look after everything for the public service. But then we also commission music for those programs, so that we will go to a composer and commission them, and my team will be involved in that process and will then do the contracting as well. Just to turn back to the reporting point, because I always think this is kind of interesting. We report everything that goes out on our BBC public service television channels, so that's various channels. There are a lot of them. I won't name them all. BBC World Service, where the content is made available from the UK. BBC Studios operates some channels internationally as well. And UK TV, which is a commercial series of channels which are owned by BBC Studios. On average, we report 250,000 items of music every single week across our platforms.
God. Now, does the Sound Mouse system help you with that, or is that done?
It does.
And what are there any other systems that you use to do that, or is that the sole one?
So there's it's principally platforms supplied by SoundMouse. So SoundMouse are one of our big suppliers. So they supply a number of things, and I think I should talk now to the things more generally, and then come to Music Box, which I want to come to, and I know you want me to talk about. But they supply something called Silvermouse, and Silvermouse is a post-production paperwork tool. So it includes things like all the copyright information, the non-music copyright information, what we call a program as completed, all the sort of talent information is in there. It's all sorts of other wonderful paperwork. And that tool also collects all of the cue sheets. Now, you can create a cue sheet in Silvermouse, but we also use Silvermouse's auto recognition platform, where we will upload a TV asset that will then auto recognize the music, and that music is then checked and approved. So it's a massive time saving in terms of creating a cue sheet. And we have proven time and time again.
Does it combine the two together? Like, in other words, if there was cue sheets made for a show, and then you upload, basically, I'm thinking that what happens is you upload a sample of the show. That way it has an idea of what the show looks like and what it sounds like, right? So when it's looking for this fingerprint of things that are in the show, right? Is that how that works?
It's listening to the actual music. I mean, the Silvermouse database is, it's a well in excess of 100 million music assets sitting in there. It's incredibly accurate and quick. And we've proven time and time again it is more accurate than a human being filling in a cue sheet. And that's no disrespect to anyone in production who creates
People
cue
make
sheets.
mistakes.
Auto recognition makes mistakes as well. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not the silver bullet, but it is more effective. And with that approval process, you can check it. But we also, for content where there's not a huge amount of music in the content, so for example, our news channels, some of our world service radio stations, we record those broadcasts, and they are then auto recognized offline, and cue sheets are created. Now, there's no approval process around that as long as it reaches a certain level of completeness. Don't ask me the number because I can't remember off the top of my head, but again, it's incredibly accurate.
So this is a whole process going on all the time. These bulk situations are being recorded a day or at a time, or however that works. Then that gets pumped through the machine, and the machine recognizes everything and gives you a report or actually makes the cue sheets. Is that what it does?
It does, and it then passes that information into Silvermouse, so the cue sheet exists there, but it also passes into the imaginatively named music reporting system, or MRS, which my team operate, and then they push all of that data out every Friday to the collecting societies. I mean, there are strict timelines in our music licensing, our music blanket licenses, I should say, that say when we have to report.
Is that the radio and the television it's listening to that you do both of them?
Yeah, so for that's for TV now, increasingly for music, for radio, but not for music radio. Um, Music radio, we use different systems. They are not Silvermouse systems. They are playout systems used across various parts of our radio estate. I mean, we have a number of national radio stations: Radio 1, 1 Extra, Radio 2, Radio 3, 6 Music, all music.
I mean, Radio
stations.
1 is a world famous.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But one of the challenges, though, for using auto recognition is, of course, that a lot of music is brand new and it's not in any database, or indeed, in Radio 1 Extra, which, plays a lot of urban music, they're playing things long before they're released, or there'll be odd remixes or what have you. So we don't use auto recognition for that because it doesn't really work. Not right now, anyway. But yes, we try to use technology as much as possible, because what I'm very passionate about is using our skills as human beings to get things right. We collect the data, we check the data, make sure it's accurate, and if we don't think it's accurate, we go and talk to the human beings who are responsible for reporting these things. And so we kind of have this virtuous circle of these conversations, but use the technology to do all of the heavy lifting. So to talk for a moment to Music Box. So Music Box is an incredibly important tool. We are not the first person to have built, jointly with SoundMouse, an aggregated platform. I mean, we're far from the first, but we have one of the biggest platforms in the world.
Music Box it's a giant library. It's made up of all different types of people. Right. Okay.
So we decided that we needed to. We had a music library for years, and when I was to go wind back for a moment, when I was at Studios Distribution, we were having licensing issues where people had withdrawn rights, and there's sort of contents we were selling that had music in it that we couldn't sell, right? Or we had to replace it. And so that's massively problematic for a big business driving hundreds of millions of dollars worth of sales every year.
Can't be taking shows apart and fixing them.
Exactly. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that we had certainty over the rights of everything going into our content. Now, there are still challenges around that, and we may touch on that later. But in essence, what we wanted to do is to build a platform where you could source the music and clear it, and have all of the metadata that you could then pass through for music reporting if you needed it, if you weren't using auto recognition. And so we went to tender. We chose SoundMouse to deliver, and it was a great experience. I mean, a great company to work with, and we built something I think very, very special. And we launched with, I can't exactly remember the number. Let's, for the sake of argument, say we launched with like 3 million tracks or something. And that felt like it was a pretty big deal. And, I'd worked very, very, very hard with the guys at SoundMouse to get deals with like all 3 of the major record labels, all the big independents in the UK, to get direct feeds onto our platform. And if you talk to anybody at a major record company, they'd all say, we don't usually do that to third parties unless it's going to pay us some revenue. And we were saying, you'll get revenue off the back of us being able to find this music easily and clear it, and you'll be paid under blanket licenses. And we had to persuade the majors to work with us, because it's not something they easily do. They'll do it on a curated basis, but they won't necessarily send you everything. And we've got everything. And the reason we got everything is because we're the BBC, and we can be trusted, and we spend a lot of time telling our users, make sure you use this system properly, and we've never really had any major issues as a result of that.
God, that's a huge thing for SoundMouse to take on as well.
It was massive.
I mean, yeah,
massive.
And by the way, the guys there are awesome. Anybody we deal with is just awesome. They're really nice. They're on it. I love them.
They are. They're terrific, and um, we've wanted to kind of carry on building that platform. We wanted as much content as possible because if you think about all the platforms I've described, pop music stations, we've got 40 local radio stations around the UK who will do everything from daytime news with a bit of music to specialist country shows in the evening or specialist folk music shows. There's massive demand for specialist music. So we work extraordinarily hard to find pretty much every label we could find, not just in the UK, but
Every
internationally.
record ever recorded.
That was kind of the dream.
That's
I
the
mean, I don't
idea,
think we'll
right?
ever get that far.
I know there's a
That's
joke
the
about
goal.
every record ever recorded. Robert Klein used to do a joke about that. A truck will come to your house and deliver every record ever recorded.
But we operate in the UK with something called the Asian Network, which plays, you know, a lot of music that's derives from India and Pakistan, such as we have deals with, you know, deals with distributors from the Indian subcontinent, for
See,
example.
that's another thing I don't think. I mean, I kind of knew it, but now that I'm hearing it, it really hits me that the all the different categories of music that you guys are covering. Most people aren't used to hearing that. In America, they're thinking, yeah, rock, classic rock, oldies, country, but they're not so much thinking, you know, Korean music, like real Korean music. I'm not talking about K-pop. I mean, like you're
Yeah,
talking about real music that's from that country. Or I get where the BBC is. That's really so
exactly.
interesting.
It's so important. And I'll give you another stat now. So we've now got roughly 42 million tracks sitting in Music Box, of which, and these are round figures, but around of which 10 million are production music tracks. So we have the TuneEdge catalog sitting on our platform, so people can find it. Production music is different because you can just download it and use it in your content. And as you know, I'm a massive supporter of the production music industry. It's an incredibly important part of the way in which we work now and will continue to work in the future. Production music is front and center of our music use strategy in terms of
And that's
making sure that we
because
have certainty over rights.
you have the rights, you have a huge catalog of it, and it's a great utility when you're manufacturing the programs,
Well,
right?
it's
Exactly.
functional. It's functional more than
functional,
a
right?
regular song. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
And the standard, you know, I mean, you know this, but not everyone does. The standard of production music these days is incredible. There is some remarkable music coming out of the libraries. I mean, some of it absolutely stunning. And very often I will come across someone who says, I don't want to use production music. And I say to them, well, you have to, because the content you're making, you cannot use commercial music for rights reasons. And we'll send them a playlist ourselves. We do it ourselves because we'll give them a choice of lots of different production music libraries to say, here's some examples, right? We're music fans. We listen to our content. We know how to do this. And 99.9% of the time, they say, yeah, you're right. There'll always be the one person who goes, I'm not happy. But in reality, they are. They just don't want to admit they're happy.
Yeah, right, exactly. And there always is somebody. It's always that person.
But I mean, on the AI point, there is an issue, if you like, the other way around, because of course we have feeds. We have so many feeds coming in. We must be receiving AI generated music flowing through into our database. And I've been asked this question quite a lot because I do a lot of work around AI around the BBC from a music perspective. I'm not really concerned about that, in the sense that nobody's looking for it. Nobody's looking for this random piece of music that's been created using an AI tool.
I think
And
a
even
lot
if
of
they
the
wanted to
suppliers,
use it,
I think a lot of the suppliers, when you're talking about you know, obviously, because like people like us are involved, we are really careful about any of that stuff. Super careful about it. I mean, and like you say, maybe some gets through, but I mean, not much. If it's getting through, it would be hardly any. I mean, we have
yeah,
got some great software that tests it. We test every cue that comes in, that rates and can tell what software it came from. I don't know. You've probably seen some of these things, but there's software that you can import that through API that it'll go through and tell you what version it came from of Suno or what it's all about. So there is some policing to do, and I think anybody that's respectful is doing it.
Yeah,
right?
no, absolutely. I mean, I'm purely from a music box perspective. Then, nobody's looking for it, nobody's playing it, and if we're going to play it, we wouldn't be able to clear it anyway. So what's the point?
Right.
What's annoying is it's costing us money in terms of having to store these
Hmm.
assets that were never going to get used, and they're a menace. And
It's pollution in the system.
exactly, and Sam House and their parents, Orpheum are very aware of that, and I know they're very active in that field. We're not actively policing anything on that platform because it's just noise, but it's just immensely irritating. But yes, in terms of AI, then you know we do have people coming to us and saying, "Well, we could give you a tool where you could just go and create your own music, make it Gen AI." Make your own. And we're not going down that road because, certainly as a public service broadcaster, funded by the license fee and by the public, we want to support human creativity. That's front and center of our thinking on this, and it's something we are very, very passionate about. And I mean, I'm working on a project at the moment that's looking about, scenarios that says, well, there's a Gen AI track that's suddenly number one. What do you do? Do you play it? And so on. And the answer to that is almost certainly yes, we would, because we would play it because it's number one and it's of interest, but we would want to be satisfied that the way it's being created has been on via licensed material.
Right. Which
So
is not.
these are big challenges. I mean, massive challenges for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, and it's. I mean, I guess what they're going to figure out a way to track these things, but right now, anything that is pumped out of a generative system, it's extremely hard to know the origins and add them up. To say, okay, well, this was pulled out of a model, and this particular piece was generated based on this 1,200 things, and everybody gets a quarter of a cent for whatever happens. There's
Mhm.
nothing I imagine there's going to have to be something like that at some point, something that can parse the tracks. But I also think that when you talk about your people that are being creative, generating their own track, there's something to be said for a creative person that's looking through things that other people created, that they can look and go, oh, I'm inspired by that one. I really like this artist, and he's going to really complement our show, rather than sitting there trying to punch in prompts and create something that they think is going to work. It might get a little boring.
I think that's a very good point. And I was looking at some advice that's published by the PRS a while back around whether or not you are able to register a track with the Performing Rights Society in the UK if you have used Gen AI. And there are three scenarios. There's scenario one, which is you have used a Gen AI tool, whether it's Suno or Udio or anything else, and you have created something and you have tweaked it and done something with it. And the term that we keep coming back to in the UK is significant human contribution. And in that scenario, that would not be considered to be a significant human contribution. However, if you have written the piece of music and you have tweaked that piece of music, it's given you some better ideas around lyrics or a melody, just a little bit of instrumentation, as long as you are in control of that, that will be considered to be significant human contribution. And lastly, if you're using AI tools to mix, master, etc., let's be honest, we've been doing that for years.
I mean, like,
Why would
That's
you
yeah,
different.
not?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
don't
different.
get paranoid about it suddenly using AI. Be transparent about what you've done. The challenge for us as a broadcaster is that you are always reliant on a third party around that transparency, the way in which they may or may not have registered the recording or the work. So we're reliant on a third party, and you have to you have to have trust.
and
Somebody,
there are people that will say, oh yeah, I mean, we've come across folks, because I guess, I don't know, for whatever reason, people want to be more than they are in some situations, but we've come across people where we know we've tested the song, it's 98% totally generated. I can tell by listening to them now. I can just hear it. You know what I mean? It's almost like the difference between fake wood and real wood. And and the person will be insistent that this is me and I did this, and we're like, it would be like standing outside of a store with products in your hand that you did not buy. We know you stole it. You're on the camera, and they're saying, "No, I bought this," and it's like, I know you didn't buy it. So there is a little bit of that. Not everybody. Most people are pretty honest, but there are people that are like, "Damn, you're just lying straight to us," which is not. That's the trust part you're talking about.
It is. It is.
Can I interject a question, Brandon?
Yeah,
Real quick?
Steve, go ahead.
I've
man.
always been curious about, and this is more of a generic question about music, and I wanted to talk to somebody from the UK that's born and raised, and I never really asked this question, but I'm thinking this is a good opportunity, if ever, is what historically have you heard in the differences between the US music and UK music? Is there some thread that you go, the UK music, or the music on that side of the pond, if you will, is more like this versus stuff that comes from the US? Is the US more, what's the word? Generative is the word I'm thinking of because of AI, but I meant, is it something where it's derivative of the UK music? Or not?
That's a really interesting question.
It is.
I'll take it offline.
No, let's have this debate here.
Sorry.
It's really interesting to me because I love music. I don't like. I really genuinely don't like categorizing music. I just think it's lazy, and I think it's anti-art to categorize music. However, in the world in which I work, I have to categorize music. It's slightly hypocritical of me. Nevertheless, I am a massive fan of a lot of American artists. I have a deep love of a lot of Americana. I love storytelling. And I think there are some of my favorite artists are American and have written kind of great stories, whether that's with Dylan or particularly for me, Tom Petty, who I was a huge, huge fan of. And I love that kind of tradition in kind of, in Americana, because that's something I'm really into. And some of the UK artists and writers I've always greatly admired tend to have followed in that sort of line. Bands like The Clash, you can describe them as being a punk rock band, but anything beyond the second album is deeply entrenched in global and particularly American music. Elvis Costello, people like that. So that's on a personal level. It's quite clear that those UK artists were massively influenced by those American artists. But at a point in time, going back to the 60s, which is where we started this conversation, the British invasion, re-imported American music to America, but with a different flavor. If you listen,
it just seemed cooler. Like for me, it just seemed cooler. Like there was something about it. It was like, and there's great American music, Leonard Skinner, whatever. But there was something about Led Zeppelin, man. It just was like this, and maybe because it's from far away, or maybe it's just because it was cooler. I don't know.
A singer I used to manage used to say to me, and she was from Yorkshire, and she had quite a broad Yorkshire accent, and she had a terrific voice, but she sang in a Yorkshire accent. So she said that the thing that most greatly influenced her when she realized she wanted to be a singer was listening to the Beatles, because they didn't sound like Americans. And there are plenty of British acts who sing in American accents. Or used to. Perhaps going back to the 70s was definitely the case. People just felt they had a sound American. And actually, you don't. We talk a lot about authentic music, and particularly when we're talking about finding music for the world service. We like music to be authentic. We like real people from a territory to have made that music. Authenticity is all. And I think one of the issues, go back to specifically to Steve's question, is that if you think of generic pop rock in the widest sense, generally thought to be American, because they feel like there are kind of American genres, whereas I think sort of kind of British acts kind of have a certain uniqueness to them, that they are, if I was thinking of a band like Oasis, they sound like a band from the northwest of England.
They sure do. They sure do. They do.
And there's something about them, and I don't just mean Oasis, I mean lots of other acts as well. They kind of reflect where they come from.
Personality is so rich of it. that you feel them and who they are rather than, it like you say, that when I hear it, it's like almost smelling like a hamburger or something, like.
I referenced Radiohead earlier because I worked for them for a period of time, and I kind of I wouldn't say particularly say I knew them, but I met them, and I spoke quite a lot to a couple of members of that band over that period. They are unmistakably a British band. They are Radiohead. They are from Oxford. They won't mind me saying this. They're a bunch of middle class public school boys, basically, but they're extraordinarily talented, and they've done something quite incredible with their career. They are amazing. I have huge respect for them. I saw them play in
Extremely
London.
unique songs. The songs are so unique.
I saw them play back in November, December when they were playing in London on that kind of brief tour they did. They were unbelievably good. But I will point to the fact that is the first time I ever saw them in the UK where I thought they played a really fantastic show. I mean, it was unbelievably good. I've seen play plenty of other great shows, but not at that standard. Yet I go back and think of the times that I saw them play in North America. In some respects, I think of them as an American band because the reason they are such a big band is because of Creep, because it broke in America and they became this huge juggernaut of a band incredibly quickly. And their fan base in America is incredible. And there's something about seeing a band playing in front of an audience who they know loves them and will react to them in a different way. And American audiences, when they really love bands, are incredible. The atmosphere I've seen at shows, and not just with that band, but other bands as well.
That's cool. That's an interesting thing. So British audience, totally different reaction. It just feels different. Is that?
Yeah, I say very often, but the British are quite, they have this sort of, it's quite standoffish quality. You're going to have to impress me.
Just go back to the Beatles a little bit, and that's the biggest example I think of all time.
Everyone going nuts with Ed Sullivan, right?
It's Ed Sullivan, and the reaction of the girls nearly fainting and literally fainting on camera. It was that massive of an admiration for these guys in the American audiences.
Yeah, I think when American audiences really love something, they really embrace it. They're really enthusiastic. I think British audiences are slightly, and European audiences are slightly more restrained. Although when they really love something, they will let themselves go. And I'm not a massive Oasis fan. I name them because they are a huge act and they are very representative of where they came from. A couple of people in my team saw them in a tour last year in the summer, and I know. I mean, I say I'm not a fan, but they went down an absolute storm. The audiences absolutely love them. And one of the reasons they love them is the things you mentioned. They have this personality. They have this presence. They wrote anthems and they're proud of the anthems they wrote.
They're almost like a street gang.
Yeah.
They have like a thing about them that's, they have a persona.
But there is another difference, particularly if you look at rock bands, and it's not the musical difference as such, but there is something about. I worked a lot in the early '90s with American bands coming to the UK and touring, and at the same time, I was watching lots of UK bands. You were kind of looking for clients, new upcoming bands to come to be clients of the firm I worked for, and then you're looking at those American bands who are on tour here. And what you realize is, I mean, no disrespect to any British musician, but in America, if you want to be a band who's known for live performance, you work really, really hard. There are long distances to cover. You play a lot of shows every year. And actually, Britain's quite small, and people think if they play 10 nights on the trot, they've completed a world tour. And that's no disrespect because they're not used to it. And all of a sudden, you send that band to America and they go, wow, this is really hard work. And the biggest British bands in America, are those bands who worked so hard and toured. Radiohead had a great example. Coldplay are a fantastic example of one of the hardest working bands in the world. They are bands who got on that tour bus and played night after night after night after night.
But you could spend a year doing that here.
You can spend a lot of time doing it.
A lot of time. I mean, each state is like its own country, for crying out loud. There's so many damn people.
Exactly.
Lots of places.
Exactly.
Did you ever come across a band called Orson at all, Paul? Never heard of that?
The name rings a bell, but I
Yeah.
can't place why. I definitely know the name.
No, it was like a British band, I believe. But one of my childhood friends was in that band, and they toured around. They played for like the Princess Diana celebration at Wembley or O2 Arena or something like that, and they were
Okay.
on the bill with Duran Duran and a bunch of other.
Wow,
Wow.
that's a big deal. Is that I forgot
That
his
was
name?
huge.
What's his name, Steve?
Kevin Renkin.
Kevin.
And I was
What was
in a
Kevin's band before that? What wasn't he in
He was-
Mother?
Yeah, he was in. Oh, now I'm on the spot. So Orson, there was American Pearl. He was in a band called Soul, and then he ended up being in Buck Cherry.
Buck Cherry. He was. In
Yeah,
Buck
that was the most
Cherry,
recent
yeah.
one. So he's around my age. So
Wow.
Buck Cherry is an American actor, or is it?
yeah, I
British?
think
Yeah.
they're American act. But Orson, I believe, was a British UK act, and he joined that. I was just curious if Paul came across him. But
I definitely had them out. I just Googled them quickly, and it's
we
I
can
kind
edit
of
this
rang.
out.
Still rang a bell as well. I'm just sort of looking at my clock. I've got sort of max sort of 10 or so minutes left because I need to get to.
Okay.
So I actually have to get something called Sync Drinks, which is a quarterly night where lots of music supervisors and so on get together. There's probably about 100 odd people, and it's in a bar around the corner from my office. And I need
love
to.
it.
Can we come?
I know.
Yeah, you'll be
We can
very
drink
welcome.
virtually with you.
I like to
You know a
drink,
lot
and
of
I like
people
music
there, I'm sure.
supervisors. Well, listen, we'll wrap it up then. It was awesome having you here. Thanks. It was like, God, I feel like we hung out, like we just, it's so
Cool.
neat to be able to do this. We really appreciate you coming here, Paul, and sharing your time with us. And I think anybody that watches this is absolutely going to love it because just great conversation, great information. You're such an awesome person. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming and doing this with us. Thanks.
It's a great pleasure to join you. I'm most happy to talk about things music and BBC, and I like most people, I quite like talking about myself. But also, you guys do some amazing things. Obviously, I'm familiar with TuneEdge, your production music library, but I've been looking at Artist Portal. I think that's fantastic. If there's one thing I remain at our collective great age, I am still incredibly enthusiastic about new music. There's something I don't get as many shows as I used to, but I kind of explore new music all the time, and there's nothing more exciting than finding something new. So what you're doing with Artist Portal is incredible, and that's great. I hope it goes from strength to strength.
Thank you so much. You know what, Steve?
Thanks, Paul.
I don't know if do you send Paul the top 5 ever?
I believe I do.
I do
Artist
a
Top 5.
thing. I don't know if you've seen it, but I do a top 5 montage. It's like goes back to my American Top 40 days. I worked at American Top 40, and I always do a montage of the top 5 there. And every month we do a top 5 artists in the portal. Next time he sends it to you, check it out because, dude,
Sure.
I mean, there's some stuff in there that even we're like, damn, this person needs to be famous for crying out loud. They're so good. I mean, you'll be surprised when you listen. They're just so good. Paul, thanks again, man.
Thank
Love
you.
having you here.
Great
Thank you
pleasure.
very much.
Thanks so much.